The film begins with Mark, a 16-year-old boy, who was partying with friends at night. Now Mark is trying to get closer to a girl, but she leaves. Then Mark goes to his own house. Mark watches an adult video at home before sleeping. His mother comes to get him up in the morning. She informs Mark that your uncle and Jenna would be arriving soon. Mark's uncle and Jenna then arrive at Mark's house. When Jenna, who was from Russia, was serving food to everyone, Mark began staring at her, and Mark's sister began telling Mark how everyone was staring at her. Only because of Jenna's dress would her mother show up. And she tells them that that could be Russian fashion, and that we shouldn't judge people based on their appearance. Jenna was already married and had a daughter named Natasha, we learn. Jenna travels to Russia in order to get her. Everyone goes to pick her up at the airport when she returns, where Mark first meets Natasha, who is 14 years old. After a few days, Mark's uncle and Jenna marry, and everyone at the wedding party is having a good time, but Natasha is getting bored, so Mark's mother informs him. So, show her around your home. Take it from Mark, he shows Natasha both his house and his room. Then Natasha asks Mark, what are your responsibilities here? As a result, Mark claims that I only watch television in my room. Then Natasha asks, didn't you make out with any of the girls here? When Mark hears this, he is taken aback and says, how can you do such things when you are only 14 years old? You're not ashamed of what you're doing. Then Natasha says, I've done it with 100 men so far, and if you want, I can do it with you too. When Mark hears this, he says, my uncle married your mother, and thus we are cousins. Hearing this, Natasha tells Mark, I despise my mother, she's a lousy woman who's having affairs with a lot of men. It's over, and she's seen everything, yet Mark remains silent. Following that, Mark's mother informs him that Natasha has arrived for the first time in this country and that he must look after her and spend time with her because he has no friends. Mark was paying attention to his mother's words, but he already knew what kind of girl Natasha was. The next day, Mark visits Natasha at her home, where Jenna informs him that Natasha prefers to be alone. And she's unique in that if she gets angry with Mark, he shouldn't feel bad. After that, Natasha's mother confronts her, but there is a fight between them. As a result, Natasha became enraged and left. As she walks away, Mark follows her and asks Natasha what is the matter. Then Natasha says she doesn't want to see her mother's face, and that by bringing her here, she has further ruined Natasha's life. Following that, Mark takes Natasha to his friend Rufus' house, where she meets Rufus, but Natasha soon begins to inquire about Rufus. Mark informs Rufus that his parents are divorced and that he lives alone, after which the two of them have lunch together, and after spending a significant amount of time together, Mark leaves Natasha at home, and Natasha informs him as she leaves that I will visit your home tomorrow. Natasha comes to meet him the next day while he is studying Mark, and they both talk for a while before going out on a bicycle. Now we learn that Mark sells his baldness to his friends. Natasha notices this and asks Mark if she can smoke as well. When Natasha arrives at Mark's house the next day, Mark gives her bald. After that, Natasha accepts Mark's permission and begins using her laptop. As soon as she turns it on, she begins watching adult videos that Mark had left there unattended, which Natasha enjoys seeing and returns the laptop to Mark. She comes up to him and says, I want to show you something, and then she begins to show Mark her nude photos while also saying, I want to show you something. Natasha begins to seduce Mark and adult. Natasha tells Mark about herself, revealing that she began doing all of this at the age of 12. Her mother was also made aware of the situation. And she used to do it all for the money. And her mother wanted to take her money, which was the reason their relationship was failing. After that, the two of them began meeting every day, and Mark fell in love with Natasha. He also drives her to the party and travels with her. Mark's uncle and Jenna now go out after a few days, so Natasha was staying at Mark's house, both chatting at night and then saying good night and going to sleep. Natasha comes to Mark's room after a while and says she can't sleep. So they both go outside, and Natasha tells Mark, I really like it. She says, I wish it was complete life can live, and Mark tells him, this is your home, you can come here whenever you want. Natasha then tells Mark that her mother is still having an affair with someone, and that she told your uncle about it, but he didn't believe her. After a few days, I started thinking of Jenna and Mark as liars. Uncle returns and asks Natasha to accompany him, but Natasha categorically declines. His mother informs him that she will not accompany him and will remain with him. that I understand why you want to stay with him while also saying that I understand what you do with Mark. Natasha becomes enraged and begins fighting with Jenna, but Mark's dad intervenes. And, even though she doesn't want to, Natasha is obligated to accompany Jenna. The next day, Mark visits Natasha's house, where she apologizes to Jenna, and Jenna responds, "That's not your fault, she's a spoiled brat who's had relationships with a number of older men." Claiming that you're a child, Jenna asks Mark to leave and refuses to let her see Natasha that night. Natasha brings all of her belongings to Mark's house and informs him that she is leaving for Florida. She inquires as to whether he would like to proceed any further. She claims that my mother and uncle divorced, and that this is all because of me. Because I shared a bed with your uncle, causing their relationship to fall apart. Because I didn't want your uncle's life to be ruined by my mother. When it was morning, Natasha stayed at Mark's house that night, and Mark gave him the money. He had set aside money in order to seek assistance, and Natasha departs with all of her belongings. Mark's family was furious, believing that their uncle had broken the marriage because no one knew the truth. Rufus, Mark's friend, had been calling him repeatedly, but he had not returned his calls. When Mark went to Rufus' house, it was still a few days later. He notices Natasha's presence. Rufus informs him that he was on the phone with him, telling him the same thing. "But you didn't take the call any further." He assures Natasha that she will be safe with me, only for Natasha to arrive and begin yelling at Mark. Mark also becomes enraged and departs. He will betray his love, the girl he was thinking of as his love until now. He didn't even consider it. And this is where the movie ends. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, until next time.